What's going on, y'all? I'm Bud Elliott. That's Danny Kanell, and that's Bill Connelly. Because Chip isn't doing hoops today. Tom is watching hoops, but I mean, somebody's got to man the ship. So it's us, and who better to have on than Bill? Welcome back to the show, man.
It's been a little while. Appreciate it.
Good to see you, dude. A couple of early notes here before we get into all the returning production, the SP Plus, Bill's general thoughts on college football. Do need to update our Cover 3 official bracket, which is dead because Texas lost to Xavier last night. So we had Texas winning when we picked them all as football teams, as opposed to basketball teams. And that kind of went dead. So not great there. But I want to get into some football talk here. We got a couple nice questions coming on from the chat. If you guys don't know, Bill is all over ESPN, college football, also doing a little soccer. I've tried to read some of the soccer stuff. I don't know if I understand it all, but I do try.
Well, I mean, that's all that matters. That's all. The effort is all that matters.
Oh man. All right. So we got a question from the chat here. Let's start out from the Cover 3 tailgate. You guys can flood these in if you want. We got Jonathan Parker, and he says, "Hey guys, tailgate question from Bill. If you were a coach and you could optimize your team's performance in one key metric to improve your win total, what would it be? Offense explosiveness, havoc rate, etc."
I mean, the offensive explosiveness, that one's a lot easier said than done. You don't always have control over when the big plays happen and everything. But I mean, there's no question. Everything coaches have always said about, big plays and turnovers win games. They're absolutely right. It's hard to control those things. And that's why it's a little tricky. You can't just say it and then they focus and then suddenly they make more big plays. But no, I don't think there's any question. If you make more big offensive plays, you're going to win a lot more ball games.
All right. Let's hit home runs. This is good. I want to ask you just kind of, overarching here. Is there any takeaways that you have from 24 that we feel like we need to apply to 25 and going forward, and maybe some stuff that you're like, this feels like more noisy and is not necessarily sustainable going forward?
Well, one of the things that I was really interested in, that's almost certainly noise, is I pitched a piece. We'll see exactly how this comes about in the next couple of months, but I pitched a piece of basically death of the forward pass. Like Notre Dame made the national title game without being able to throw 10 yards downfield. It was really interesting. It just kind of, generally speaking, a lot of the national averages kind of sank a little bit in terms of passing as a whole. So we know that we lost a lot of high level quarterbacks after 23. And we know, just looking at the draft class, we know that conceptually, maybe this year's quarterback class was down a little bit and now it'll rebound. So not really overthinking that one, but it was definitely interesting. And I definitely think at least a little bit it reinforces something that has been I think we've kind of known for a little while. And that's, in this sport, you have kind of the offensive life cycle. There's the innovation, and offenses have all the advantages, and then the defenses adapt, and it becomes more about pure talent than scheme, I guess. We're definitely in that period, I think. Defenses definitely know what they're doing a lot more against kind of just the average college football offense than they did 5-10 years ago, 10 years ago, especially when tempo was working really well and all these things. So I definitely think we're in the more defense friendly era. And we saw that a little bit on the field. Other than that, I think it was just that, the mid-majors aren't as good as they were 10, 15 years ago, and it stinks. And I wish that wasn't the case.
I think you're spot on. I think when we were ranking, we went through the 12 teams in the playoff, and when you rank the quarterbacks alone, it was kind of like I was making a case that Cade Klubnik was the best quarterback in the playoffs. And Tom was like, "Are you really?" And I'm like, "Who's better?" It just wasn't a great list and some of the best quarterbacks in the country didn't even make the playoffs, which I think speaks to what you're saying. And I think you're absolutely right, because I remember when tempo was there and you'd see defenses look like they were caught with their pants down, like, oh my gosh, how do we handle this? We have one check, we go to this. And then it was like offenses were just picking them apart.
Yeah.
Now they have counter checks. So when they see you, and you just see them handle it much better. They've been prepping for it. So I think you're absolutely spot on with that. I do wonder, when we see, because I think it's like a pendulum that swings back and forth. Everyone was going up tempo, everyone was throwing it, looking for the explosive plays through the air. Then you think about, all right, well, if you're a team that doesn't have that explosive offense, you run the ball to try to keep it away from them, and you have great defense that, helps you get off the field. So I think that trend is absolutely the pendulum has swung back a little bit towards normal football. I think what we're seeing now, which is good.
Yeah, I think that's, because certainly, so many of the innovations have been basically defenses are big and strong, so let's get smaller and faster. And the defenses get smaller and faster, so we get bigger and stronger. And you just kind of go back and forth like that. It definitely feels like a period where offenses are finding more advantages trying to be physical against maybe not smaller. I mean, the tackles are still huge and all that, but you're still, 5 DBs is the absolute norm now, as opposed to 3 linebackers. And so, I think the offenses are looking elsewhere to find advantages.
It does make me wonder here, like, are defenses getting better at giving you things that are less efficient, right? Like more too high. We're going to stick with 5 DBs because we know that passing is more efficient than running by a good amount, right? Like, cool. If you guys want to run it on us, maybe to like a less extent that we see in the NFL, because the NFL is so fewer running quarterbacks. And if your 11-man run game against 2 high is actually kind of decent oftentimes, but it's still not as good as like a great passing attack. So I guess I don't know what the next evolution here is. Like maybe you get so good at running the ball that teams have to get out of that 2 shell, but you're seeing this in the NFL as well. Like the explosive pass plays are down as defenses realize, like, we just can't give up the home runs.
Yeah, I mean, innovation usually goes up toward the NFL, but in this case, you think about the Mahomes effect, so to speak, where they just backed off the safeties and said, okay, you can have anything 5-6 yards by the line of scrimmage. Maybe that kind of trickled down towards the college level too, where, yeah, I mean, you can be as efficient as you want, but we're not going to give up big plays. That requires offenses and quarterbacks and everything to be smart and patient and things that, 20-year-old dudes aren't, known for being. So it's pretty effective strategy right now. I do like after 2019, I remember after kind of just the perfection of LSU's offense in terms of kind of modern touches and talent and everything else. I tried to do a piece on, how offenses got here. How have we perfected offense, so to speak. And one of the guys I talked to was Rich Rodriguez, always a fun guy to talk to about what he thinks will come next. And he was thinking, maybe the next innovation here is that whole like get bigger and stronger thing by getting tight ends out wide more, whether it's blocking, whether it's creating weird matchups and all that. I think we've kind of seen that, but only with specific tight ends. The base offense isn't using, tight ends lined up wide all that much, I don't think.
Bill, you mentioned the mid-majors being nowhere near as good. Obviously, some of the mid-majors are now in the majors, right?
Yep.
Cincinnati has moved up from 10 years ago, and Louisville hasn't been in the ACC for all that long. And like a lot of these teams have been plucked into the Power Four conferences. But like if we can measure like a team that was still in the G5, like it's Memphis versus old Memphis, or Boise versus old Boise.
Yeah.
Like, do we think those teams are how much worse are these mid majors than they used to be?
Well, Boise's, I mean, the best example. It's probably an unfair example because they were particularly good 15 years ago. But at their peak in the BCS era, whatever we want to call these eras, they had 3 straight years where they hit the SP Plus top 15. They peaked at 6th in 2011. They were easily, I think, the best mid-major or really close to it. They're a very talented team last year that did really good things. Ended up 29th in SP Plus. So I think that alone tells a story. I mean, every year the G5 is going to produce good teams, because just alchemy, like just certain things click and suddenly Troy's a top 30 team, but then they lose their coach and all their good players and it's over and they have to start over. It's a lot harder to, I think, sustain success now. It's always been hard because you can always lose your head coach, but now you can lose your head coach and your starting quarterback and your 3 best receivers and half your defense. And even a team like Boise State that has a little NIL money to play with is still going to be really having to fight and scrap to keep their best guys. I think what they've done this year is really interesting. I think they're going to be, I mean, obviously, they lost the best running back in the country, but I think they still have kind of by far the most talented team in the G5 at this point in the season, in the off season. And, we'll see what that means. We'll see if they can keep this going for a few years. They're not apparently in danger of getting plucked away and put it by a power conference, because that would have happened a long time ago. But we'll see how long they can keep it up.
When you look at the transfer portal and what it's done to the game. Bud has been on this because he feels like the teams that have the means to do so early on, they might have been willing to say, all right, you're going to leave. We'll go see what the market's going to pay you. And a lot of guys left, and there was really good talent that was available in the portal. The recent trend, specifically this class, was teams are like, all right, we kind of know the market. It's starting to settle a little bit. We're going to pay to keep our best players. So there hasn't been that many available in the portal. Great players. Have you noticed that as well?
Yeah, I think, number one, the biggest effect in the portal is just it's more things you have to be good at. And like Kirby Smart hasn't been quite as good at it as others, either in who he lets go or who he brings in. And so that's it's been an evener in that sense, I think. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, you look at the teams that are atop the current returning production list. There was a whole bunch of teams that were in the kind of teens and 20s and 30s in SP Plus last year, and were able to kind of keep the band together. Clemson, I mean, they're a brand, but Arizona State's up there, Illinois is up there, A&M is up there. Not that they ever lacked for money, but they were able to keep a lot of their important guys. And yeah, I think the combination of the portal and the money getting more have versus have nots and all the different things that have come about have made the kind of the first and second tiers of the sport kind of closer together, I think, which is good for if you want a fun national title race. And it's made it just even harder for the G5, obviously. Like right now, as I calculated it for that piece last month, let's see, Big 12 was at 60% average returning production. That was the best. And it is Big 12. It's not like it was SEC and Big 10. And then it was, money isn't everything, I would say here, but the SEC was second at 59%. ACC was also at 59. Those are a little lower than normal, but they're still pretty decent. And then you have the Sun Belt at 51, the AAC at 49, Mountain West at 47, and the MAC at 43 or 44. So, just good players are just getting plucked away, and it's harder to sustain something at that level. But it's making those top it's making a lot more teams think they can make playoff runs, and that's not innately a bad thing, even if it's a bad thing in another way, I guess.
Are you seeing specific trends? Like obviously the G5, their returning production numbers are really low as they're the ones that don't have the money to keep their players. Whereas like with the house settlement, even a lot of your lower third, P4s tend to find a way to keep at least some of their studs and just throw a bunch of money at it. What are the implications of this though, as far as like, I don't know, does it make it so that we're very unlikely to have like a true G5 Cinderella, but also I really can't speak with certainty as to who I think is going to win the title this year. Like, it feels so wide open.
Yeah, that's probably the trade-off is, I've been one of those just begging for G5 representation forever, and I finally got it, and now all the G5s are weaker than they would have been, had this system existed in 2009. So that's absolutely been a trade-off, but you're right. I mean, I look at the, just my preseason projections so far. I mean, Ohio State's obviously number one. They were always going to be number one. But that's, I have a lot of questions about Ohio State at this point, both in who they lost and, who they hired as coordinators and everything else. So I think what I wrote in when I put up the initial SP Plus was that like number 2 and number 16 are projected closer together than they really ever, than I can remember. And yeah, so if you want a really fun race and we want to argue about a lot more 3-loss SEC teams, we're going to have a lot more of them this year because there's a whole bunch of SEC teams that just pack together, and whoever wins their close games is probably going to make the playoffs. So I think it adds to excitement to a certain in one way. And like I said, we all talk about 07, we all talk about Boise State and all those stories. We're kind of legislating those stories away, but we're creating excitement in another way too, I guess.
I know we've gotten this question before from some of our listeners, but with that gap, increasing between the Power Four and the Group of Five, and who knows what the next round is going to look like. But assuming they still get a team in, do you think what's the deepest run you think they could get? Do you think they could win a game? Do you think they could win multiple games? Could they get to the Final Four? Like where do you see how big is that gap?
Yeah, I mean, if like obviously Boise was kind of an interesting situation last year, having the best or at worst second best player in the country. And honestly, there were a couple red zone miscues, like flip the red zone around in that Penn State game, or give them a home game instead, which was what I wanted all along. And maybe that's a much closer game, or it flips. So I think in general, you're going to be looking at the G5 team in a 14 or 16 team playoff here in the future. Playing a top team, obviously in the first round, upsets can always happen. NIU can always beat Notre Dame. So therefore a G5 team can always win that game one of these years. And because it's not like 1 versus 16 in the NCAA tournament, it's not one of the 4 best teams versus like the 238th best team in the country. So that can always happen. And if you can beat the top team and you're playing like the 8th seed in the second round, you can win that game too. I would assume Final Four is as far as you're ever going to see. It would take a lot of breaks and just the right kind of talent to get further than that. But I just, we're still, whoever makes it out of the G5 is still going to be like a top 30-ish level team. And those teams can beat top teams. So they can't beat 4 top teams probably, but they can beat 1 or 2.
I found something interesting in the returning production piece, and that obviously SP Plus thinks the SEC will be back, clearly on top as the best conference, and it probably was top to bottom last year. And I'm
bottom especially. The bottom was why it had the best average last year. Yeah,
this is where I'm going. Yeah, like I mean, so in the piece you said, hey, the SEC only had 1 team outside the top 52, I think, and the Big Ten had 7. Like I was thinking more like, hey, the SEC has so many quarterbacks that I think have like real upside, whereas on the Big Ten, probably a little bit less, or maybe like a year away. Like Underwood might be really, really good, but is he going to be like, amazing as a true freshman? Probably not. Like Sayans, first time starter type thing at Ohio State. Dante, the same thing at Oregon. I mean, if these quarterbacks hit for the SEC, and if the bottom of the Big Ten doesn't improve, this could be like a real clear pulling away.
Yeah, I think this was, you never want to overreact to 1 year, but I think what we saw last year is approximately what we'll usually see from the Big Ten and SEC. SEC will have better depth, and the Big Ten will probably have the better top 4 on average, or something to that effect. I would assume that one of these young quarterbacks clicks at a very, very, very high level, but you don't know which one for sure, and it probably won't be all of them. And so it'll be a situation. Where do I have? So I have Big Ten teams ranked 1, 3, 6, 13, and then like 21, 25, 26, and 30s and 40s and whatnot. So definitely a similar story. Michigan is obviously the biggest mystery to me, just because they proved by the end of the year they don't need a great quarterback to beat good teams. And they probably won't have a great quarterback this year, but just a higher floor at that position would have made a massive difference for them. And I think if Underwood or whoever at least provides a better floor, then they're going to be a really solid team. And then it just depends on, again, so much of this comes down to close games and everything. Illinois is going to really struggle. They're probably going to be better than they were last year, but they're going to struggle to match last year's record because they won so many weird close games, couple overtime games, that stupid Rutgers ending that I loved. That's really hard to replicate. So they're going to struggle, but Iowa might make a run because they lost all their close games last year. So we'll see, but we know who the top 3 teams are going to be most likely. 4, I guess.
All right, let's go ahead and hit a break here. And after the break, we're going to talk about some teams that SP Plus loves, and we'll get Bill's thoughts on like how comfortable he is with some of the love being shown to these teams.
CBS Sports HQ, giving you college football coverage unlike anyone else.
We're talking Big Ten.
Pre- and post-game coverage.
Are you encouraged with the way that this team responded?
Along with breaking news.
A lot of movement in the rankings this week.
Highlights and expert analysis.
That streak could be in jeopardy here.
Sure. What was your main takeaway from this game? How impressive was his domination?
That really changed the football game.
Let's go ahead and have some more fun.
Another wild ending.
The chaos continues.
Turn to CBS Sports HQ.
Am I reading the CBS Sports Bracket app, Debo? Or is that or is that closed now? Like, I think we still have some time to get the brackets in, right?
If you're watching live, we got about 40 minutes.
All right. So it's bracket time. So get yours in now, like right now, on the CBS Sports app. Enter the bracket challenge for the chance to win a new Nissan Armada and trips to the 2026 Final Four. You can also play in men's and women's pools with friends and join our pool. Get the CBS Sports app or visit cbssports.com/cover3 to start filling out your brackets and probably finish too, given that, it's about time. No purchase necessary. See terms and rules for details. All right. So, Bill, I have some teams here that SP Plus is very high on, and some teams that maybe it's not quite as high on in the bye. So, a lot of love being shown to Alabama to start after kind of a shaky at times first year for Kalen DeBoer. They come in at number 2, but obviously the gap between 2 and like 10 in SP Plus this year is tight. So, I don't know how much we should read into them being 2, but does this say more about the confidence in Alabama, or in just the compression of the market and maybe the lack of certainty about some of these other schools?
Yeah, anytime I kind of press that button and I see what the final list is going to be, it's usually fun to be surprised. And this year, my biggest surprise was, it's them again. I mean, if nothing else, number 1, it's really kind of 2 through 5 or 6 are especially close, and they just happen to be a decimal point ahead. So we shouldn't read too much into that. But also, they're still one of the 2 or 3 most talented rosters in the country. They still have a head coach who everybody listed as one of like the 2 best in college football a year ago. Like, it wouldn't, as if you watched the team at the end of last year, then you kind of know like they were out of sorts for sure, especially on offense. But nobody's going to be surprised if they rip off an 11-1 season. Nobody's going to even pretend to be surprised by that. I think it all, last year, whether it was having a younger coordinator, you get Ryan Grubb back, that probably helps a little bit. But also it was just that it really seemed like a bunch of good defenses down the stretch figured out exactly what Alabama really didn't want to do. And they were able to make Alabama do it a little bit more, and it didn't work very well. So offense fell apart. Now you're going to have a new quarterback. New quarterback doesn't mean it's going to automatically be awesome, but it could be there. It's going to be one of 3 blue chippers, and he's going to have a really experienced receiving core, very, very good offensive line, and a defense that was good last year and is experienced this year. So it's not going to surprise me. I wouldn't have voted them number 2, but I would absolutely, it's been kind of, I've seen some of the way too early's drop them into like the low or high double digits. I would have them in single digits for sure. And it's not going to surprise anybody if they're really good.
The other team that you're pretty high on in here on the rankings is Penn State. Now, I'm sure that's music to the ears of our producer today, Debo, big Penn State guy. It shouldn't be surprising though. Losing Abdul Carter's big, but they made this big push to bring back the backs. They made the move to get to bring in Knowles from Ohio State to run the defense. But they are higher than Michigan, Oregon, other teams that, have performed better historically, especially against the power players in the Big Ten. Is this the year that you think Penn State could make that push, especially with all the question marks around everybody else? I
mean, they certainly think so. They've certainly spit big as if they know this is their shot. I mean, losing Abdul Carter hurts. The next time they don't have a good pass rusher will be the first time in like 10 years. Obviously, bringing Dennis Sutton back is a big thing, and they've got plenty of other guys. So I can't even pretend to be worried about the defense. The only even slight hitch I would have with the defense is usually Jim Knowles isn't amazing in his first year in a new job, but he also hasn't ever experienced or inherited a defense that ranked this highly in his first year on the job either. So, at Duke, it took him a little while. Well, of course it did. Oklahoma State took him a year. At Ohio State, but they were coming off a disappointing performance too. So they've got what he needs. They've got good safety play. They've got good pass rushers still, I think. Secondary, a couple of new stars have to emerge, but they got lots of candidates for that. So I can't even pretend to think this is anything but another top 5 defense for Penn State. So then it just becomes like, how much do you believe in the offense? Offense improved a ton last year with Connelly. I love Connelly. He gets, there are times when you could probably lean on your strengths a little bit more. He seems to, he has a lot of fun drawing stuff up and wants to kind of show that off sometimes, but it usually works. And they were 9th in offensive SP Plus last year without a receiver. So if we think that the receiving core is going to improve, the actual wide receiving core, obviously they're going to get a little worse at tight end. If we think the wide receivers have anything more to offer this year, they're going to have the running backs, and I think the offensive line, and Aller's going to be more experienced for all of his glitches and for how tough it was to watch the end of that semifinal game against Notre Dame, where he went out there and said, "I'm going to go win this game," and immediately threw the game losing pick. He still improved a ton last year over the year before. And if he improves a little bit more and the receivers improve a little bit more, what's not to like? They were a semifinal team that was one play away from the title game last year. So I think they're absolutely, what did I have them? Third. Yeah, I knew they'd be in the top 5, and they should be.
One of the things I find really interesting here, Bill, is the Big 12. So 7 of the teams ranked 26 to 36 are Big 12 teams, and Kansas State is the highest at 19. It really, I find this league like incredibly entertaining. Yes. And then Big 12 fans get mad at us when we're like, there's no real like serious natty contender, but you can still appreciate the quality of play and the closeness of the games and the drama and the different styles they play within this league without thinking it's like, a serious threat to win a natty. That is crazy though, to have 7 of the 26 to 36 be from one conference.
Yeah, it was. This is kind of basically how it was last year too. Generally speaking, I'm very concerned about the whole separation have nots, all that stuff. That's one of the biggest things I end up talking about a lot. But there's no question that last year's moves, as we saw them, it gave, if we had the conferences that we had in 23 last year, Texas would have run away with the Big 12. Oregon would have run away with the Pac-12. And instead, we ended up with a more competitive Big 10, a more competitive SEC, and a more competitive Big 12. I don't think, sacrificing the Pac-12 altogether was worth it just because of that. But there's no question we had really competitive races. And Big 12 now doesn't have a dominant brand. Every single year, whoever wins – number one is going to be the team that went like 5-1 in one-score games, like Arizona State did, or something very close to that. And that's going to produce a team that, if they can keep it close in the playoff, if it's close in the fourth quarter, as we kind of saw with Arizona State against Texas, like they can make the plays to either win or come achingly close to winning against a really good team. So I think whoever this conference produces is going to be a very, very seasoned and confident team. We're never going to know who that's going to be ahead of time. It's going to be any number of Kansas State, TCU, BYU, Iowa State, Arizona State, Utah, maybe Tech, maybe even like a Baylor, maybe Kansas. Like, it's going to be one of those teams, but good luck figuring out which one.
How do you compare the ACC versus the Big 12?
Kind of like the SEC and Big 10, in that Big 12 has the depth, but the ACC probably has the better top teams. That's probably the best way to put it. Like, we can confidently say that, if Kansas State's 19th, we can confidently say Clemson's higher than that. Miami might be higher than that. SMU, Louisville. I guess that's probably it in terms of potential top 15 teams. But, we know that there's a little bit more of a proven entity there. We also know that Stanford stinks, and Wake Forest is probably going to take a little while, and Virginia is probably not going to be very good. Boston College, there's a lot more. I hate, dead weight is meaner than I really want it to sound, but there's just going to be, the worst teams are going to be worse in the ACC, and the better teams are probably going to be better.
I think that makes sense. Yeah, which, if you're Jim Phillips, it's like, why are you agreeing to get the same number of automatic playoff bids as the Big 12?
Right. Like, even if the Big 12 is a better conference on average, you're probably going to, in an average year, you're going to probably get more playoff spots. You're right.
Yeah, I'm like, guys, if it's the playoff, like, it's about the top teams. It's not about the depth. Like,
yeah, they almost got 3 last year, and that conference wasn't very good.
Yeah, right. I think the Big 12 is like a great regular season league. But one team that actually did win the Big 12 last year, it seems like SP Plus is still fairly high on them this year. Like, was Arizona State, I don't want to say lucky and then might be good this year, because they were certainly good last year, but like, were they fortunate and good, and this year they might just be like good regardless of luck?
Well, Arizona State fans certainly don't think SP Plus likes Arizona State very much. I've heard that a couple of times over the last few months. They finished in like the 30s, I think, last season in SP Plus, because they were in the 50s at the start of November. They barely beat Texas State. They were scraping by, and then after they lose to Cincinnati with the quarterback out and all that stuff, and then they just slowly became an awesome playoff level team. So they only ended up in the 30s, but they return a ton outside of Scattaboo, and they're 29th, right there in the middle of like the 7 teams that are co-leaders, and it'll just come down to whether they have that close game recipe. I know you and I have talked a ton about, like, is there a recipe of proper game management and quarterback play and special teams and all those things, if Arizona State has that again, they could absolutely do it. I watched my Missouri team win all their close games one year and then almost win all of them the next. So if you've got the quarterback play and the proper coaching, you can do it. But it's still pretty hard. And, they got some breaks last year that they might not get this time around.
We just got done with our hot seat episodes, and basically like the way we do it is we couch it. If Vegas is right, is this guy in trouble this year? Is it basically it takes the pressure off us of saying like, hey, they're going to go 6-6. That's not really the point of the exercise. It's like if these Vegas expectations are right. But I'm curious, if you're an athletic director in a school, one of these like major, like the two really bloated leagues now at the top, how much are you trying to focus on quality of play metrics as opposed to just record? And record certainly matters because you got to sell tickets, and like record is going to impact your booster spend and whatnot. But I'm curious, like, and I specifically here with Oklahoma, like SP Plus likes Oklahoma a lot, and yet it projects it to win 6.2 games, which, that's making a bowl, but not by much.
Yeah.
How much are you trying to factor in like advanced analytics and quality of play? Because it might have more signal than just a win-loss record, especially some of these bloated leagues.
Right. That the last part is key. Like the quality of play is in your control. The schedule, especially in these conferences, especially if the SEC is going to keep playing 8 games, the array of potential schedule strengths in a given year is so huge that, you can, if you tell OU fans right now, you're going to go 6-6 next year. They're probably going to be ready to get rid of Venables, but also they could be a top 20 level team and go 6-6. Their schedule is absurd. And then, a couple of years from now, their schedule will probably be much easier, and they could actually, do things if they think that the quality is what matters and that they're still on track. Record matters for ticket sales. And, even if you're the best 5-7 team in the world, you're probably going to have a lot of guys ready to transfer at the end of the year if you disappointed and went 5-7. So it's hard to keep everything on the right track if the wins don't come. But also, OU, I have in the next projections update for May, I think I figured out finally how a decent way of how to, capture coaching and coordinator changes in a way that actually, makes it more predictive. I've never managed to figure that out, but I think I have. That's only going to make OU better because it's basically going to look at like how did you perform versus like a huge like 20-year average. And OU had their worst offense in 25 years. So they just hired a new offensive coordinator, brought in a new quarterback. That probably means their offense is going to improve, and they're probably going to go up in the projections and still be projected to go like 7-5. So I absolutely think that should matter, because if you want to make a smart, informed decision, how good you were matters more than what your record was.
All right, it is 11:35. We've been on the show for 35 minutes. Hopefully Florida State fans have already left the chat, because you have them at 51st. That is behind Duke, Virginia Tech, NC State, UNC, Georgia Tech. But it is 2 spots ahead of Pitt, the Pitt Panthers. How much of that is about the 2-win season last year, which I think Florida State fans, myself included, are hoping that was an anomaly, versus, all right, the roster has some serious issues?
Well, Florida State's unprojectable. You're not supposed to be capable of ranking 9th in SP Plus one year and 83rd the next. Top 25 offense and then 114th the next. Like, that's not supposed to happen. And so you're from a projection standpoint, it's completely just throwing a dart here. And it's split in the difference, basically, is what it's doing. So I would assume that Florida State's upside is obviously far higher than around top 50, but it was probably higher than 83rd last year, and we didn't even see a glimpse of it. So it's kind of burden of proof on them. Of course, SP Plus is going to project them in a pretty iffy manner. It's up to them to prove that that last year was the greatest anomaly of all time. I'd sure like better quarterbacks to choose from this season to expect some massive improvement. I don't really see what I need to see there, but I would assume, like, if I was betting, I would say they're gonna, what are their projected 6.2 wins. I would still assume they get to like 7-5 or 8-4. I don't know why you would possibly think higher than that. They got to prove that.
I think you nailed it with the quarterback thing. Like,
yeah,
in some ways, like what they did, coach, like coordinator wise and portal wise, I think potentially makes them more projectable because I just don't think you can be a sane person and project a decent to good passing game with what they brought in, which really limits the ceiling. But also, if Castellano stays healthy, the run game should be a good bit better, which I think it's high floor, very low ceiling approach, probably by design because you got to save your job,
Yeah. And I thought Squirrel White was going to be incredible at Tennessee because Heupel's always had like a slot receiver who averages 25 yards per catch, and they just suddenly stopped making big plays these last 2 years. Maybe that wasn't all on him. Maybe he's got a lot more upside than he showed the last couple seasons. So big plays there, but I mean, yeah, like completely new offensive line, quarterback who. You're right. When he's healthy, like early last season, he was super scary and super annoying to just try to like corral and everything. But he's also 5'10", 195, and he's probably going to get hurt again. So, it is hard to project massive success. The defense, obviously, I would expect to overachieve against projections, but offense, I'm not as confident in.
Yeah, that makes two of us. All right, let's hit a break here, and when we come back, I want to ask Bill, who is the lowest rated team by SP Plus that you could actually see making a Cinderella run to the netty? So when we come back.
The clock never stops. Relive the greatest moments with uninterrupted highlights and more. It's Gareth Bale! Wonderful goal! On the UEFA Champions League channel. Streaming free.
We are back here on the Cover 3 podcast. Fortunate to have Bill Connelly of ESPN, godfather of SP Plus, and a bunch of other awesome stuff. All right, Bill, this sport has a ton of compression in it right now, it feels like. And when we talked earlier, like, okay, probably not a G5 team coming up and winning the natty, but there are so many teams that could. Let's do a fun one here. Who is the lowest rated team by SP Plus that you could see? Like if everything clicks, they have like actual natty potential.
I'd love to make a Louisville case at 22, but I don't think I can. I think they might have a title level offense, but not enough. I mean, if you're really stretching the bounds of believability, I think OU being at 20, if they have another top 15 offense or top 15 defense, and suddenly the offense is spectacular with new coordinator and new quarterback, you could. I mean. Obviously, the schedule is going to hurt, but with that schedule, if they can get to 9-3, they're probably in the playoff or very close to it. So, that's not out of the realm of possibility, but it's hard to sign up for that one. If it's not Florida obviously has the same schedule issues that OU, but if DJ Lagway is suddenly the best quarterback in the country, then, maybe they can ride that. If it's not Florida, then I think you got to go up to LSU at 10. Like that's obviously they're super fascinating for what they're trying to do defensively, but I would struggle with anybody below that. Clemson, A&M, Michigan, if they have another great defense and Underwood's spectacular out of the gate, but I would say top 10 or number 10, I should say.
What's the lowest that's actually won it?
In terms of projections, I can't think of when a low projected team like LSU was probably still like 5th or 6th in projections at worst in 2019. So I think it liked Florida State way back in 2013, at least like top 10-ish. So yeah,
that's about it though. It doesn't come past 10.
Right. And having a tournament, an actual tournament at the end of the season where you have to beat 4 top 15-ish teams probably to win, that does kind of limit. We're going to have bracket chaos and Cinderella runs, but in terms of winning 4 games, it's not going to be any easier to win it now than it was in the 4-team or the BCS or anything else.
That makes a lot of sense. So some skepticism expressed there on Clemson. I'm assuming that's because they did lose like 4 ACC games last year.
Right. They were
like 4 regular season games.
Yeah. I mean, they were 22nd in SP Plus. They've been the last 4 seasons. They've averaged a ranking of 18.5 in SP Plus. And I think that's pretty justifiable. So they're clearly good. They're number 1 in returning production. I think this is a really fun season just in terms of we're going to find out what their ceiling is at this stage. Because this is probably going to be the best Clemson team since that run of contenders. I just can't The defense was 29th last year. It'll be better, but top 10, I can't guarantee that. The defensive front's obviously got loads of potential, but it had loads of potential last year when it was 29th. The offense leaped all the way to 16th last year. 16th is very good, but it's you gotta, I think what we saw from the offense against Texas last year, where suddenly they're throwing the ball downfield and making huge plays. You got those two sophomore receivers. Williams is reliable. Like, that all seems awesome. But all of that coming together and them being suddenly like a top 3-ish team, I just can't quite. That's a hell of a leap, and I can't quite get there.
What about other teams in the top 15 that your numbers like that you're not so sure on?
Plenty. Anybody in that 10 to 15 range could easily be like 30th, and it wouldn't surprise me all that much. But, I think basically, obviously it likes the SEC as a whole, and it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like 8 teams between 7th and 17th or 18th. I mean, half of those teams are going to go like 7 and 5, and while schedule strength is going to be part of that, they're also, it's not easy. Like Missouri's 15th, that's very reliant on Bo Prabula being a quarterback capable of leading a top 15 team. Defense should be good, but there's a lot of new pieces on offense that could click but aren't guaranteed to. South Carolina, I loved their defense last year, and Dylan Stewart's awesome, but he's the only one back pretty much of all the guys I thought were awesome. He's the one. And so they've got a lot of questions to answer, and Sellers has to be way more consistent, and that's not guaranteed to happen. Plus, Beamer teams always seem to peak late in the season after being extremely mediocre halfway through the season, and that's not going to fly if we're talking about a top 15 campaign. Miami obviously has a load of questions to answer on defense, and while their quarterback is experienced, it's probably a downgrade from what Cam Ward did last year. So I'm skeptical of all of those teams in that neighborhood. Half of them are going to underachieve, and that's just kind of how this works, I guess.
Am I crazy to think that Auburn, if Arnold plays like to his potential that maybe he showed in high school, could do it? Because I know they need a lot of improvement in a lot of areas, but a lot of the improvement seems not crazy to project. Like Cam Coleman could become the second best receiver in the country in short order, and I think the O-line's way improved, and I don't know. It feels like it's very quarterback dependent as far as needing the big jump in play positionally. Everything else was kind of okay-ish.
Yeah, they were more efficient than their opponents last year. Like, their success rate was 46%, and their opponents was 37%. That's tremendous for an SEC team. They had, 8.9% of their plays gained at least 20 yards, and to 5.7% for the on defense. So they were much more efficient there than their opponents. They were much more explosive than their opponents. And the reason they were so mediocre last year is that teams aren't usually that reliable in terms of always self-destructing in the red zone and always committing a turnover at the worst possible time while never forcing turnovers. Like, those are what we tend to call the little things, and they blew up Auburn's season completely. And so, was that extreme randomness? Like, trying to identify why they were that consistently bad in terms of red zone and turnovers. If you want to just say the big things are all that matter, and now they're probably going to be better at quarterback, even if they're not great, and they're going to have an awesome receiving core, that kind of sounds like a top 10 potential kind of team. I just, I've never seen a team that reliably self-destruct like that. And I can't quite tell what that means from year to year.
So I was a little bit surprised. If you would have had Bama and Texas flip-flopped with the recent history and the rosters, with Arch Manning coming in, I wouldn't have been surprised. Did you think you were when that number came out and Texas was at 7, which is still really high? The odds makers have them second, favorite to win it all. Were you surprised they were a little bit lower?
I was. I mean, once I thought about it, it started to make more sense. But right out, just in terms of eyeballs, you're right. If I just flipped those two teams, then everything else looks extremely normal. But basically, I mean, SP Plus the last 3 years ranked Texas 7, 6, and 7. So projecting them 7 seems about right in that regard. They were, 7th when they lost a bunch of close games and went 8-5 in 22. And then they were 7th last year because they won some close games and their offense wasn't quite as reliable. But it really just does. I mean, I think they're absolutely getting, in terms of poll bumps or whatever, they're obviously getting kind of an arch effect kind of thing. And I can't say anybody's wrong for doing that. We don't know that Arch Manning can read a defense yet. We assume, and it's a very fair assumption, that, another offseason with Sark and all this stuff, like it's very fair to assume he's going to take a huge leap, but we haven't seen it. He obviously, when he had to sub in against UTSA, he had like the best 20 snaps a quarterback has ever had in the history of college football, like throwing for a 60-yard touchdown, running for a 60-yard touchdown, all that. But the more he was in the game, the more defenses kind of figured out what he wasn't as confident at, and they were able to adjust. So, yeah, I mean, SP Plus doesn't give an arch effect kind of bump, so therefore it sees them as basically the same team they were the last few years. Which, I mean, again, I understand if we want to assume Arch is amazing, I kind of get it, but SP Plus isn't going to see that necessarily.
All right, like kind of sweet and sour here. Which was the rating that came out? You're like, yes, like I love that picking up on this because it matches my biases. And then which one was like your double check or triple check teams? Like, really? We're gonna hit public on this?
Well, the double check was, obviously, Ole Miss being second last year threw a bunch of people for a loop. I kind of loved that they were there because it really did. It kind of defined the purpose of SP Plus. They showed more upside in their wins than virtually any team in the country outside of Ohio State, and therefore they were second behind only Ohio State. And they looked, I mean, they crushed Georgia. They crushed the teams they beat. And in terms of the way they lost 2 of their 3 losses, they were very statistically unlikely losses, just in terms of all the things it took for them to lose that game. They were a tremendous team. If they'd sneaked into the playoff, they absolutely could have done massive damage. So I was extremely confident in Ole Miss, and I liked that they were number 2. I could explain it. I was hoping they would fall further than 9th this year because I don't like this transfer class as much, and they just lost so many of the key pieces that made them so good last year. Whether we're talking about Dart, whether we're talking about Trey Harris, obviously he wasn't there the entire season, but he was dynamite. Offensive line getting completely rebuilt, and I don't necessarily love what he brought in to rebuild it. I don't see this as a top 10 team, so that one I was kind of hoping they would slip a little further than 9th, even though if you're second, you're only going to slip so far the next year. In terms of what I liked, I thought Penn State being top 3 was justifiable. I thought Notre Dame, I mean, honestly, the way their depth was tested last year and the way it passed every single test it got, I think that says massive things about what they could be capable of. Didn't love the D coordinator hire, if I'm being honest, but until the next bad defense they have will be their first in a long time. So they're probably going to be good there. And I thought they earned top 5. Oregon fallen. In my head, Oregon returned a ton and was going to be top 3 capable again. But then when I actually updated their roster, they lost way more than I really had comprehended. And I was glad that they fell out of the top 5. I thought that was 6th is probably about right for them. Obviously, I mean, they're going to be good, but it's going to be hard to go 12-0 again. Clemson being 11th, I was curious how far they would rise. I'd probably like them being more like 9th or something, but that was about right, I think. I really honestly like Alabama was the one that made me roll my eyes, even though I can justify it. And I did kind of hope Ole Miss slipped a little bit. And I mean, honestly, like I'm not saying this as to prove my bona fides, but Missouri being 15th threw me a little too. I assumed they'd be more like 25th. So, we'll see about that too.
Random one that's kind of in the middle of the pack. I'm not sure if it's taking your attention, but the hire of the head coach with 6 Super Bowl rings has. North Carolina, they're right there in the 40s. What do you put in for a secret weapon of a girlfriend who's secretly running the entire college football program there at North Carolina?
Yeah, speaking of unprojectable.
Or a minus?
Yeah, speaking of unprojectable, this is just an amazing thought experiment that I'm not going to really bring anything to the table here. After the season ended, I had this piece go up about like before I had the numbers in front of me, I just wanted to like create rules for here's how we're going to fill out the playoff. Like the SEC champion has to either be Kirby Smart or somebody who has beaten Kirby Smart previously, and the ACC champ is either Clemson or a team that beats Clemson in the regular season. Just created little rules like that. But I got down to the Indiana Memorial at-large bid, out of nowhere at-large bid. And there weren't many good candidates for that this year. So I was like, screw it. I'm picking North Carolina. I'm pairing them against Texas. It's going to be great. Manning versus Belichick. Here we go. That was a facetious exercise to a certain degree. I'm not going to pretend that they have anything close to, like, Max Johnson could still be solid, but like, I don't know, like Ryan Brown from Purdue doesn't blow me away. So I don't know that they're going to have anything at quarterback. Obviously the skill core is getting completely rebuilt. The offensive line wasn't great. The defense hasn't been great in forever. So yeah, I would just throw top 50 up there and just wait to see what happens. Cause I have absolutely no sort of preconceived notions here.
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating one because I think word from some of the guys who coach for Mac is like practices not unserious, but maybe not super efficient, right? And Belichick is not really known for wasting time in practice.
Yeah,
not that many are, but I would struggle to think of like a more drastic turn in terms of like how we're going to use our practice time.
Yeah,
and going from late career Mac Brown to, well, I guess late career Bill Belichick. We have to assume maybe that's something that he still does pretty well. So I have no idea how you actually project that.
No, and that's kind of the fun part too, is, you know, if it turns out that he's just an amazing teacher and developer, that's awesome. Like, that's going to be really fun to follow. But you just look at the talent that we know they have, and they don't have just a ton here. I was actually surprised. I figured the glorious late career Bill Belichick move would have been going to D3, like go back to his home conference and just coach, like just be a teacher and teach these kids and try to go 8-2 in the NESCAC or whatever, one of those D3 conferences. I guess maybe he still could, but he's going to try this first.
You would have a lot of short wide receivers.
$10 million will make you come back too, to give it a little run at North Carolina as well.
Yeah, that might be a little convincing. I doubt anybody in the NESCAC can match that.
Right.
Bill, are you have any college basketball thoughts for us here as the tournament starts?
More than normal, because I ended up doing the game day pod last week and you know, hopping through all of that. But I you know, it does feel like the boring thing where the number ones are a little better than normal this year is probably the best. It feels real. And the number ones certainly look good. I am very curious about the SEC as a whole. Just 14 teams. I thought they should have gotten 13. I was at least a little justified with Texas losing yesterday, but you know, typically Ken Pomeroy had an interesting thing a couple of weeks ago about how typically the big overachieving best conferences of all time kind of run out of gas by March and don't really live up to getting all the bids that they got. So I'm curious a lot. You know, Auburn lost 3 out of 4. Lots of teams weren't necessarily at their absolute best at the end of the season. I'm curious what that means.
Oh, I love that article. I posted it, and Greg Sankey retweeted it and like shot it down with all these stats of how dominant they were in the regular season. I'm like, I get it, but that doesn't translate in the postseason. Right. That was the point of the article.
Right. And it could translate, but the whole point of like whoever the best conference is for the season as a whole, it means like how good was your conference in November and December.
Right.
Because that's when all the non-conference stuff happened. They could still have the best teams overall, but it's just not guaranteed because a lot can change over 3 months. So just, yeah, I'm really, really curious. They earned their top seeds, especially, but you know, like I said, some might run out of gas here. Big Ten had that problem a couple of years ago, so who knows?
I mean, Danny getting Sankey to, you know, react to him over a basketball opinion was masterclass. Oh man. Bill,
we all can't wait to see the SEC play in this tournament. I got a lot of drafts in the folder.
All right, and again, they might live up to all of it. I just it's not a guarantee. We'll see.
Bill, tell us where I'll find your work and what you got coming up next.
Well, I'm going on vacation next week, so there's that. You won't see anything from me for a little while. Actually, no, we timed every year. I update my top quarterbacks of the 2000s list. We're timing that for while I'm gone next week, which I love. So you know, go yell at my the social media that I'm not on next week. But so yeah, we got that social media. Obviously, we're in a weird spot, but I'm still ESPN_Bill C on Twitter, and then ESPN Bill C without the underscore on Blue Sky if you're over there. So still post semi-periodically, at least, even if not as much. There are links to my work in both places.
Wait a second. Given the year of quarterbacks we just had, how much updating was really done to this?
Yeah, I don't want to spoil everything, but I was actually surprised. Like once I actually laid out the career stats, we ended up, every year I end up expanding the list because I add new guys, but I don't want to take any away. So then I throw a couple old names on there and get up to, so we're up to 90 this year, top 90 quarterbacks of the 2000s, and ended up with 5 from this, this class, so to speak. No top 25s, I don't think. Or no, actually, like no top 20s. But, most of those guys are in like the 70s and 80s, but they made the list. There's that at least. And Cam Ward, it didn't really hit me. If you add in his FCS production, he ended up like almost as many yards as Dylan Gabriel did, over 18,000 over his career, which was just, I hadn't comprehended that. I've liked that guy for a long time, and I hadn't thought about how many yards he was throwing for.
A guy who had like 2,100 combined rushing and passing yards in his best year in high school. Wow.
Modern day success story.
Dude, absolutely. Awesome, man. Well, I really enjoyed this. We'll have to have you back on again soon.
Absolutely. Take care.
Enjoy vacation, buddy.